Welcome to this virtual service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Waynesboro. I am Mary Beth Nolde, and I am the Worship Arts team leader here. My husband and I have been members for over 10 years and feel inspired by the fellowship and spiritual experiences. Because of COVID-19, we will not be meeting in person for quite a while yet. By now, we've grown accustomed to this new normal. Weary, perhaps, at times, but accustomed. We know about social distancing and wearing masks and washing hands and avoiding indoor meetings of more than quite a small number. We may be tired of it. It may have taken a toll on our mental calmness. And we're definitely anxious to go back to something like the old normal as soon as is reasonably safe. And so, weary and anxious, but largely safe, we come together virtually. We bring our anxiety and joys and our concerns. We bring our whole selves to this time of worship. Our fellowship stands for ever-growing inclusion. We voted in 2004 to become an LGBTQ welcoming congregation, a denominational certification through which we have obligated ourselves in love to welcome to full participation and equal celebration of the lives and meaningful relationships of people historically marginalized and oppressed because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. With that vote, we sought to identify and act as an explicitly larger we. We have followed the lead of our association and the leadership of people of color in growing our understanding and taking steps to become anti-racist, rather than seeing ourselves as not racist. We celebrate the lives and inclusion of people too often marginalized and oppressed because of racial or ethnic identity in this society whose history was built on violence and exclusion. We seek a larger we. We now light the chalice of our hearts with these words by Nathan Ryan. Be it real or metaphor, whatever is in your backpack or your briefcase or your purse that you carry through your daily life, in your education, your work, your daily activities, any of that is weighing you down. Leave it behind. Whatever you are carrying that is keeping you distracted or caught up in shame or guilt or hopelessness, leave it behind. If you need it, it will be there when we're done. But for this time, just let it go. Come into this time with open hearts. Come into this time with a soul that has remembered how to be tender again. Come into this time with a renewed hope for this world. Come into this time ready to build a world we've always been worthy of and have always dreamed of.
When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing place, when our heart is in a holy place, when we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we tell a story from deep inside, and we listen with a loving mind, and we hear our voices in each other's words, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when we share the silence of sacred space, and the God of our heart stirs within, and we feel the power of each other's faith, then our heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place, when our heart is in a holy place.
Our words of prayer today are by Meg Barnhouse, Maureen Killeran, and Annie Scott. Dear God, may I be kind, strong, and brave, joyful, useful, loving, honest, and healthy. May you be kind, strong, and brave, joyful, useful, loving, honest, and healthy. May we all be kind, strong, and brave, joyful, useful, loving, honest, and healthy. May love's truth be upon our vision. May love's wisdom dwell within our hearts. May love's persistence inspire our lips. May love's gentleness give comfort to our bodies. May love's gratitude accompany our sleep. May love's healing be a balm for our brokenness. May love's serenity give peace to our weary souls. May love's confidence energize our minds. May love's challenge keep us faithful. Faithful in our struggle, faithful in our conviction that love and justice and hope will ultimately prevail. We bring our hands over our hearts to expect respect for ourselves. We expand our hands into a small circle to express respect for others. We expand our hands out wide to express our respect for this congregation. We bring our hands over our hearts to express respect for ourselves. We expand our hands into a small circle to express respect for others. We expand our hands out wide to express our respect for our congregation. We bring our hands over our hearts to express respect for ourselves. We expand our hands into a small circle to express respect for others. We expand our hands out wide to express our respect for this congregation. Amen, and may it be so. Each week as we come together, it is our custom to share with each other the joys and the sorrows that are on our hearts, that are defining our lives, that give meaning, that give challenge. We hope that our joys will be met with a shared joy in each other. And we trust that when we share a sorrow, that our sorrow will be borne along by our side with those who love us. Charlotte Schneider this week writes, "The big storm blew down a large tree in our backyard. Fortunately, the only damage was to a lawn cart. Also that Rob, our live-in handyman, and his friend were able to chainsaw most of it up right away and take it to the landfill. It is also good to see the Stanton community helping with the severe damage downtown." Let us hold this and other joys and sorrows unspoken in our hearts together quietly.
I'd like to read you a piece by Dana Capasso called The Butterfly Effect. The delicate flapping wings of a butterfly have the power to set molecules of air in motion, in turn, moving more molecules of air, a tiny act that is eventually capable of affecting weather patterns on the other side of the planet. Now, this notion comes from a concept within chaos theory called the butterfly effect. Simply, the butterfly effect refers to a phenomenon in our world in which a small change in one place can result in equal or greater changes elsewhere. And this may seem crazy, a tiny butterfly changing global weather patterns? Not only is the butterfly effect a real scientific theory, but it's also an intriguing philosophical idea. I say all this because the butterfly effect affects the way I live my life and the decisions that I make in a way that no ideas about God ever have. She goes on to write, I'm no meteorologist, nor am I well versed in entomology. But ever since learning about the butterfly effect, I've been attracted to it because it demonstrates an important principle that is often forgotten. Namely, each of our actions has effects that are more profound than we think. Interconnection is a major theme found in nearly all of the world's religions and philosophical traditions. Now, the interconnectedness of our universe is also one of the most significant revelations of physics. All components of matter are interconnected, interrelated, and independent. Now, as Unitarian Universalists, we affirm and promote our responsibility to remain aware of interconnection through our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence. Attention to interconnectivity reminds me, despite the many socio-political forces that work to divide us from one another, that I'm never alone in the world. It reminds me that each decision or action I make has reactions, and that those reactions reverberate as waves moving back and forth across our globe. This compels me to live my life aware of the consequences of my daily actions, from the purchases I make to personal interactions with others. I certainly do not always succeed, but I try. My awareness of interconnectivity and efforts to work against the illusion of division remain my most significant spiritual practice. Ms. Capasso concludes, this spiritual practice also gives me the ability to stand in awe of interconnection, in awe of the butterfly effect and the power that comes with it. On rare occasions, I am reminded to stop and appreciate the divinity of interconnectivity revealed before my eyes. This to me is awe-inspiring. This to me is divine. So if we see a butterfly this week, let's thank it for the reminder of how our actions affect others and the universe. Let's focus on how we are interconnected rather than what threatens to divide us.
Sergey Rachmaninoff composed and premiered the Prelude in C-sharp minor in 1892 when he was just 19 years old. He was a composer of the late Romantic movement, which was an international European artistic movement that prized imagination, that celebrated the unruliness and power of uncontrolled nature, that moved away from the cold reason and unyielding extremity of rationalism in the Enlightenment in favor of the artistic expression of emotion and awe. Where the Enlightenment celebrated a certain centralization, if you will, a growing globalism of commerce, the Romantic movement celebrated folkways and fostered nationalism. Rachmaninoff was from a musical family of minor Russian nobility. When he composed this prelude, Russia was in turmoil and change. It was still only 31 years since the serfs were set free, when more than 23 million people received their liberty. It was long enough that a 19-year-old composer would have experienced a completely different world than his grandparents, but not long enough that society had resolved its inherited issues of inequality. 2 years after he played the prelude publicly for the first time, Tsar Nicholas II, the very last of the Russian Tsars, came to the head of the empire, and 6 years beyond that, the Marxist Russian Socialist Democratic Labor Party coalesced. The handwriting was on the wall for a society structured on inherited inequalities of wealth and power. And every time today that Putin interferes in American elections, and every time we Americans assert our own international dominance that grew in the soil of 2 world wars and the military actions around the edges of the Cold War, we are still part of the story that Sergey Rachmaninoff wrote a theme for at age 19. In 1917, Rachmaninoff fled the Russian Revolution and came to America as a concert pianist. He made his name here on that same prelude that he wrote at the age of 19. If you look him up on Wikipedia, you can even listen to a 1919 recording of Rachmaninoff playing his own interpretation, some years later from that original premiere, of this signature work. He was 46 at that time when he recorded that one you can listen to on Wikipedia. America loved the prelude in C-sharp minor. As Virginia Edwards introduced it in the video from which we heard her play, she saw this prelude as the story of a storm with thunder, wind, sleet, and even a sound of church bells as the wind of that storm tossed them from side to side, all represented in musical notation and keystrokes on the piano. It is indeed very romantic, full of emotion, and it was written in a world nearing a breaking point. Everything was about to be completely different again. Now, why on earth would I pay that much attention to an admittedly beautiful and moving prelude and played by our own dear Virginia Edwards? Can you guess? That's right. It's another illustration of the butterfly effect, of the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Respect and reverence for this web is something that Unitarian Universalist congregations covenant together to affirm and promote. Everything that is interconnected, influenced, shaped, made possible, sometimes thwarted, sometimes shaped for success and victory, sometimes by everything, by absolutely everything else that is. The smallest things. The atoms moved by the wings of a butterfly affect other things in a vast matrix of the all. Virginia Edwards absorbed the vibrations and studied the music and was influenced by it. It played a role in shaping our friend, the pianist we loved, and so all the interconnections from Tsarist Russia through the Russian Revolution, on through the Cold War, through the destruction of the Berlin Wall and the fall of the Soviet Union, all made their way into the life of our own congregation. In many, many ways, not just musically. There is no separating the strands of the interdependent web from each other. Another powerful example of the interdependent web, of the butterfly effect, if you will, fills newspapers and TV news reports every day, months on end. It's the omnipresent reality of COVID-19. Remember when we first heard of the devastation China was forced to deal with? It seemed so remote. It seemed like somebody else's problem. And then it was here. Remember when the first case in Virginia was reported in Fairfax? Remember when the steady march to a few hundred Virginians with the virus already felt like it could develop into a doomsday scenario if we were not quite cautious? COVID-19 shows us the complex interactions between social well-being, economy, raising a new generation, psychological well-being, politics, polarization, American extreme individualism, and a microscopic virus that are all interconnected with everything. There's no separating it out. Because of an unwillingness of so many to admit that their personal choices affect public health, not simply their own, or to use an old-fashioned religious term, because of the blasphemous rejection of the interdependence of all, a disbelief in the broad impact of every action, spreading into unimagined areas. Because of those weaknesses, as a society, we find ourselves as a nation still facing massive loss of lives, at least partly to avoidable causes. And we find people giving weight to a particular advantage or disadvantage of timing and methods of reentry in ways that ignore the big picture of true interdependence. Everyone knows that because of dysfunctional requirements of our economy, most parents have no choice but for their kids to return to school. A pandemic does not determine whether it is a need or not. But some recognize that children are not immune and serve as vectors to family members, as well as not escaping risk themselves. So what can be done? School districts across the country took or are taking their own idiosyncratic positions or well-informed positions based on all the science and all the data on how to deal with this reality, with some sticking their head in the sand regarding the health risks of school as normal. Remember the school in Georgia that opened up and then suspended some students who posted pictures online of kids in a crowded hallway not wearing masks? Yeah, it turns out that 37 people at that school have tested positive for the coronavirus. There was no escaping the connection between masking choices and the spread of infections. Locally, here, school boards thought that they were going to be able to return to in-person schooling by using a complicated pattern of rotating attendance and online instruction in some hybrid form. Teachers and students saw start dates shifted, moved around more than once, and a great deal of uncertainty about this school year's capability of educating kids. Protests were many, and ultimately in Stanton and Waynesboro both, the school boards backed down and moved to a first semester of virtual-only instruction. It is complicated and hard to figure out and harder to implement because absolutely everything in some way impinges on the decision, on who benefits and who is hurt, on who benefits partly and who benefits greatly, and who is hurt partially or greatly. Waynesboro and Stanton school boards have made the right decision, but that does not make it easy because everything is connected, and what affects one in this way affects another in yet another way. There is nothing simple about the butterfly effect. We come from a tradition that went through a period of a kind of rationalism that was rather linear. Do X and Y will result. Now that's even then oversimplifying it, but we live in a quantum world and nothing is as simple as that linear model suggests. But still, or because of this, we are encouraged as Unitarian Universalists to respect or indeed to revere the interdependent web of all reality of which we are a part. The complexity of it all is part of the reality that is meaningful to us. Out of the complexity comes life. Out of the confusion comes the opportunity to grow and to root ourselves ever more firmly in reality and indeed in imagination as well. Out of the turmoil comes new development in art and philosophy, education and commerce. We live in the proverbial interesting times. May we honor the complexity, navigate the dangers together, and respect the infinite ways what we and others do affect us all, both for good and for ill. May our respect for science give us the capacity to adapt and lead in ways that our world needs us. Amen, and blessed be.
Hello, everyone. This is
Hello.
AJ and Adrienne Young again from the social justice team at the UU. I want to share with you some important information about why it is so important for you to participate in the U.S. Census. Extremely important, and one of the reasons is because participating in the census determines how many seats are in the House of Representatives for each of the states. It also determines the number of electoral college votes
right.
per state. It also determines the amount of funding that goes to Medicaid and Medicare for each individual state as well.
So it's important to know that the last date that you can self-respond is October 31st. And you can respond by mail if you received that census form and just haven't filled it out yet, or you know someone who hasn't, please encourage them to do so. They can call by phone, but there are long waits, and I'll give you the number at the end of this to do that. Or they can fill out their census form online. It takes about 10 minutes. They can do it from any computer or any smartphone. It's very quick and very efficient. If you want more information, you can call 1-800-923-8282. And if you want to fill out that census form online or encourage someone else to do it, they just need to go to my2020census.gov.
Have a good one. Peace.
Bye.
Hi, Sharon here from the Social Justice Team. I'd like to talk today about the restoration of rights following a felony conviction. The easiest way to do this is online at the Commonwealth site restore.virginia.gov. On this site you can check your status. Last week I was working with someone who didn't know that his rights had actually been restored in 2016. If that's not the case and you need to have your rights restored, you can do it on that site. It takes a couple of weeks, and after your rights have been restored, you still need to register. And of course, that has to be done by October 13th. So now is a really good time to get started on the process. I know that I have some family members who've had a brush with the law, and making a mistake doesn't mean that you stop being a citizen, and it doesn't mean that your voice shouldn't be heard. So please spread the word so that everyone can take part in the elections in November. Thanks.